my son, man, for nothing. When he was trying to get away from you, you were trying to get away from you, man. And you kept shooting him while his back was under the truck. You kept shooting him, man. You kept shooting him. And his back was turned to you, man.
This is Michael Madison, a serial killer who is facing charges for multiple murders in Ohio.
You stripped them from the waist down. You folded them in half, binding them so that their feet were up by their ears. You wrapped them in multiple layers of trash bags, and you discarded them.
Michael Madison is a convicted serial killer responsible for 3 women's deaths in East Cleveland, Ohio. He was arrested in July 2013. After the bodies of 3 women were found in garbage bags near his apartment. Born in 1977 in Cleveland, Madison grew up in a troubled household. His mother suffered from drug addiction, was very abusive, and encouraged her boyfriends to abuse Madison. In July 2013, police investigating a foul odor found the decomposing body of a young African-American woman in a garage leased by Madison. The victims were identified as 38-year-old Angela Deskins, 28-year-old Shatisha Sheely. The third victim was 18-year-old Sherelda Terry, whose body was discovered in a nearby garage. All 3 of Madison's victims were black women, and the coroner could not determine the cause of death due to the state of decomposition. The search for Madison began, and he was soon tracked down and taken into custody after a brief standoff with police at his mother's house. Madison was charged with 3 counts of aggravated murder. As if the crimes were not horrible enough, wait till you see the drama that unfolded in court. Things took a dramatic turn during the trial. Van Terry, the father of one of Madison's victims, was giving a victim impact statement when he looked back to speak directly to the crazy man that murdered his teenage daughter. Weirdly, Madison smirked at him, and Van Terry lost it. He lunged at Madison. Court officials had to hold him back while Madison, restrained but visibly grinning, was moved to a position of safety. Madison was charged with multiple counts of aggravated murder, kidnapping, and sexual assault. He pleaded not guilty because of insanity, but the jury ultimately found him guilty and recommended the death penalty. In 2016, a judge sentenced him to death for his crimes. However shocking you thought Van Terry's explosion was, it wasn't the only time a parent attacked a murderer in court, like in the case of Jasmine Gordon and Clifford Thomas, who's facing charges of involuntary manslaughter in Detroit, Michigan. Jasmine Gordon and her boyfriend, Clifford Thomas, had taken 3-year-old Jamila to the hospital, claiming she had hit her head and stopped breathing. However, officials determined that she died from physical abuse, not from hitting her head. Both Gordon and Thomas were found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. Still, they appeared in court on the same Friday so that victims wouldn't have to give their statements twice. However terrible the crimes were, what happened in court was even more dramatic. Jamila's biological father, Dwayne Smith, was set to give a victim impact statement when he suddenly attacked Thomas from behind. Sheriff's deputies had to intervene to keep the 2 men apart. The fight caused a brief recess, but the court resumed, and Gordon and Thomas were sentenced. Gordon was sentenced to 7 to 15 years for involuntary manslaughter and 14 to 25 years for first-degree child abuse as an aider and abettor. Meanwhile, Thomas was sentenced to 6 to 15 years for involuntary manslaughter and 1 to 2 years for resisting and obstructing a police officer. You may think that the actions of Jamila's biological father is obscene. However, it pales when compared to the horrible behavior of Willie Clay Fields in the case of Lindy Jones, who's facing charges for murder in South Carolina. In August of 2019, 19-year-old Lindy Jones killed 18-year-old Willie Antoine Fields. The victim's family, unaware that their child had been murdered, reported him missing for days. Fields was later found shot to death off a roadway in Orangeburg County. Lindy was charged with murder, while Jalen faced charges as an accessory after the fact. Although the murder was terrible, the courtroom action was something else. At the sentencing hearing in Orangeburg County, Jones stood before the judge. The victim's family, positioned in the first row, took the opportunity to address the court.
They took away my only child. It was so hard.
It was at this moment that Fields' father, Willie Clay Fields, made his move. In a swift and intense act, he lunged at Jones, striking him forcefully in the back of the head. Look again as Willie Clay quickly bypasses the lone policeman standing behind the assailant and gives the teenage killer a blow to the head. The situation escalated quickly as the father tackled Jones, bringing him to the ground. Court officials rushed to the scene and intervened, pulling the two men apart. Officers eventually escorted Jones out, while others restrained the victim's father. Following the incident in court, the victim's father was charged with assault and battery in the third degree. For Jones, he apologized for his actions and was sentenced to 35 years in prison. However terrible Willie Clay Fields acted, some grieving fathers have lost it in court too. There's the case of Lukace Kendle, who's facing charges for the murder of Kejuan Bird. Kendle had callously shot and killed Kejuan, leaving a grieving family desperate for justice. Kejuan Bird and Michael Smathers were unarmed and around their car when Kendle, who was an armed security guard, opened fire on them. Bird was shot 4 times in the back and died from the gunshot, while Smathers made it out alive but was paralyzed. Kendle, who had a criminal past, was charged with second-degree murder and attempted murder, despite claiming to be mentally unstable. In fact, Kendle was declared incompetent to stand trial twice before being ruled fit to be in court. In a courtroom filled with tension and raw emotions, his lawyers still argued that his client should be sent to a hospital for medical care rather than prison.
And then the issue is that you want him housed where?
At the same facility he's been housed.
In order to prevent him from decompensating?
Yes, Your Honor. He eventually decompensated to the point where he was sitting in a fetal position, naked, not eating, and not interacting with any human being.
That's when Kejuan's father's anger boiled over. Donald Bird, the grieving father of Kejuan, could not contain his fury upon witnessing Kendle's lawyer.
Yeah, but my son is dead, man. My son is dead. He need to go to prison. He don't need to be laying no mental hospital. He need to go to prison, man. Come on, sir. He want to play crazy. He wasn't crazy when he killed my son, man. He wasn't crazy then, but he crazy now. All of a sudden he crazy now. You want to lay in a mental hospital? You don't murder my son, man, for nothing. When he was trying to get away from you, you were trying to get away from you, man. And you kept shooting him while his back was under the truck. You kept shooting him, man. You kept shooting him. And his back was tight to you, man.
However, as justified as Donald's outburst might have been, the rules of the courtroom do not allow such disruptions. The bailiff, with a heavy heart, had no choice but to escort Donald out of the courtroom. In the end, Kendle represented himself in the case. He argued that he was only being charged because of his skin color. His logic made no sense to the jurors, who sentenced him to life in prison. However, some parents have a more direct way of telling the killer of their child how they feel. This is Desean Brown, who's facing charges for murder in Cincinnati. Brown was charged with 2 counts of murder, as well as felonious assault, gross abuse of a corpse, and tampering with evidence. The allegations against him involved the murder of his then-girlfriend, Nitisha Lattimore, and the horrific act of putting Lattimore's 3-year-old son into the Ohio River. Tragically, Nilo's body has yet to be recovered. However, during a procedural hearing, Antonio Hughes, the father of Nilo, the 3-year-old boy allegedly killed by Desean Brown, took matters into his own hands. Hughes lunged at Brown, repeatedly striking him in the head and neck before being subdued by deputies. Despite court officers handcuffing Hughes and escorting him out, his anger couldn't be contained.
Chill out, dude.
And he attempted to attack Brown again, requiring 4 officers to restrain him. Hughes was subsequently charged with contempt of court and sentenced to 7 days in the Hamilton County Justice Center. Revelations from Cincinnati police detectives added another layer of tragedy to the case. They disclosed that Nitisha was believed to have been pregnant with Brown's child, but suffered a miscarriage. Detectives suspect that Brown believed Nitisha killed the baby and retaliated by killing Nitisha and Nilo. Plus, the fact that Brown bought a body bag on eBay suggests a motive of vengeance for the miscarriage. If found guilty, Brown faces the possibility of the death penalty. If you thought these cases were shocking, you would be appalled by the case of Aaron Fryer, covered in this video.